The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello, and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me and my guest this week. Let's get right into it. This is a follow-up interview to something that my guest, Julie McKernan, and I did about a month or two ago. We talked about her story growing up in Scientology and getting away from Scientology, the whole gamut. We kind of covered the basics of her story. And if you haven't heard that podcast, I'd suggest that you go back and check it out because it's really interesting and provides the whole bare bones of the story. But Julie and I knew that we were going to circle back around in future episodes and talk about other aspects of growing up in Scientology, learning Scientology, experiencing Scientology, and all the culty fun that goes with that. And I'm trying to be a little lighthearted today because this is a very serious topic. We cover a lot of nasty stuff, but at the same time, after having lived through it and survived, there's a little bit of, we can look back and laugh at some of the silliness. And so today, maybe we'll do a little bit of that. So Julie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so very much for having me back, Chris. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I enjoyed I shouldn't say, but I do take pleasure in hopes that my stories will help others. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. No problem. And that is always the intention, is to help educate, inform, help people understand the very human experience that is being in a cult. It's not, we don't turn into a bunch of automatons and robots and zombies and our brains aren't sucked out of our heads. It's not really that simple. It's a much more complicated thing. And especially for those of us who unfortunately were born in or raised in these groups where nobody really asked us what we thought about it. It was just kind of, here it is, kid. This is the truth of life. And this is what you're expected to do. And when we say jump, you say how high. And this is how it is, and that's not a lot of fun. Now, one thing that we need to correct the record on from our first episode, because it was Julie's memories of Julie's life as lived by Julie, is she compared some of her notes with her mom. And we talked about her mom in the first episode because she played a rather prominent role in the story of...
Prominent.
What's that?
Very prominent.
Yes, exactly. And so obviously during the course of that, there can be memories are different. And so in comparing some notes with her mom after the first show, we wanted to say that there were some factoids along the way that could be considered maybe a little inaccurate. For example, the Boston org was actually a mission, not an org at the time that your mom was working there and doing her stuff. And that's pretty detail oriented in terms of the actual specifics of the story, but accuracy does count. And
yes.
So we wanted to correct that record for your mom.
That makes total sense. And thank you. Yeah, that's exactly right. And to be honest, in my speaking with her, she wasn't so focused on the details, but she's still detail focused, which I am too. It kind of comes with the breed, so to speak.
Of course. And they do matter. I don't want to brush it off or anything, but it's...
No, but thank you for saying it that way because that puts it out there plainly. And she wanted to make sure that, she did what she did. She was who she was. She is who she is. And I'm absolutely in love with my mom. I love her to pieces. But she wanted to set the record straight. And so I'm like, okay, Mom, I'll do it for you. No problem.
Excellent. Well, good. Well,
That's all I'm doing.
no, I think we've accomplished that, and I don't mind fact checking at all. So it's not really a problem to do that. So here we go. Let's carry on with the story here. Now, there were some interesting tidbits along the way that we sort of talked about but didn't dive into because we knew we were going to do stuff like this. And one of the things that I'll start with, as far as going back over some of the more interesting parallels that you and I had in our Scientology experience, is there are things that Scientology parents do that other people in other religions or other activities do too, but it's not dogmatic. It's not instructed to the parents to do this, and yet they do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of Scientology parents will do a few different interesting things with their kids that we've talked about over the years in various interviews I've done. For example, they will take the Scientology ethics system.
Oh, yeah.
Bring it into their family.
Oh, totally. Oh, right? Yeah. I did amends all the time.
Yes. And I did condition formulas.
Oh, well, that's what I mean by amends. I mean, I learned the condition. Let me just explain to the listeners, if they're not aware, what we call the conditions formulas are these set of steps that you do when you're dealing with any position in your life, whether it be up or down, and you're supposed to do these steps in order to get to the next step up so that you are gaining ground to become more ethical. That's the whole concept. And so part of the ethics conditions could involve all kinds of stuff. And one of them is amends. And I was very familiar.
Yes. Yes, I think we all were. Another thing that can often be brought into a family with children is the Scientology concepts of exchange.
Fair exchange.
Yeah, that everything must be exchanged for, and therefore this can sometimes be interpreted by parents as, giving their kids things or gifts even is frowned upon. Exactly. Like, nope, we're not going to do that in this family. And another thing, and this is where I wanted to get to with us today, is supernatural, paranormal powers and abilities.
Yep.
Right. A key part of Scientology's belief system is that we are immortal spiritual beings. We are not bodies. The life unit that represents you, me, and thee is a spirit. And that spirit has the ability to create and destroy matter, energy, space, and time. And there's all this stuff in Scientology about how powerful and even godlike a thetan, a spirit, is. Yes. And so Scientology parents will sometimes take this idea and go, okay, well, then my duty as a parent is to develop those abilities in my child before they're even doing the rest of all the formal Scientology stuff, because those abilities are sort of in there. And we just need to.
Somehow I got this, that those powers, I don't know what else to call them, were innate to me. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, all I needed to have from my parents, well, not all, food and all that good stuff was great, food and shelter and all that. But the drawing out of the powers that I have and that I need to remind you of your powers was a very strong thing in my family.
Yeah, and how did that manifest in your family? It was kind of interesting in mine, in a real subtle kind of game my mom would play with me. But what did your dad do with you?
So I told you about the psychic cards,
mm-hmm.
Right? But then, when I think I was about, maybe 9, my dad taught me how to play. It's going to sound weird, but he taught me how to play chess. And I love the game of chess. It's a game of strategy with limited players. But then he would sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes say, okay, what do you think the bishop is thinking? And it was my job to figure out what his next move was going to be on the chessboard. I mean, that's how kind of interestingly odd it gets at times.
Hmm.
And then also, but I love chess and I still play it to this day. I like the game.
Sure. As in, you were supposed to read your dad's mind as to what he had in mind with the bishop?
Yes.
Okay. Not that the bishop as a piece was literally sitting there thinking something.
No. It's like, what do you think I am telling the bishop to do next?
Got it.
As a kid, it was kind of fun. It was like, wow, that's kind of trippy. But there were often times, not, I wouldn't say often, but often enough where somehow I was ingrained with the idea that I just needed to know what other people were thinking around me, including my parents and my brothers and my dogs and my horse and my pig. I had a lot of animals growing up. Like I thought that it was in me to understand their intent or understand their thoughts and pick them up and then therefore help them the correct way based on what they were thinking.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it was a wild upbringing because I just expected myself to read minds, which is kind of crazy. But
well, I mean, yeah.
But I believed in it so much that I actually tried to do it and thought that I did do it on many occasions. Like, oh, and there, to be honest, there are times when, your dog looks at you a certain way. You can go, oh, you're hungry, or oh, you need to go outside, or whatever, or your horse whinnies at you. He wants to go play or go ride. I get that. But it was deeper than that. Like, I thought that I could read flowers' minds.
Right. Detecting the sort of, I think in Scientology, one way we kind of talk about it is sort of tuning into the theta or the theta waves, or they don't really say theta waves in Scientology, but
but it's, yeah.
Getting on their wavelength. They do say that.
Exactly. So you tune into the wavelength. Yeah. There's a, this is going to sound way off the rails, but I'm going to bring it to you anyway.
So, please.
After I left Scientology, or very shortly thereafter, or towards the end, I'll say. Well, earlier in my life, I worked as an electrician. Okay? And there's such a thing as a grounding rod. It's
what was that?
A grounding rod.
Rod. Okay.
Rod. Uh-huh. Yep. It's a big copper rod. I'm trying to make it. It's big, but it's like 3 feet usually, maybe 4 or 5 feet.
Like an actual rod of copper.
Exactly. Yep. It's a big rod of copper that you pound into the ground, and it's called a grounding rod. And then you ground a house or a building to that grounding rod in case there is an overload of electricity that gets into the system. They have a rod because electricity wants to go to the ground. Therefore, the name grounding rod. And there was one conversation that I had with a couple of former Scientologists where I said, I felt like a grounding rod, where I was the one who would receive all this like weird negativity, and I felt guilty about everything, and it's all my fault, and I shouldn't have done that, and I shouldn't have studied that. And I just took it into myself. I was the grounding rod. and I wanted to plant it somewhere. And it took me years to find a way to do that. You and many others have helped me do that, because for a long time I felt like I was soaking up all this angst, and it was on me as a trained auditor. Very well, not the max, but a trained auditor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very good listener, and I wanted people to tell me, pardon me, their stories. I wanted to hear their stories. In in session is different. That's all private. At least it was in my day. But outside, I still hear stories, and it's just this concept of like, tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me. I'll put it in the ground. Even though that is nonsensical, it's something that I somehow garnered from, I guess, living in Scientology for so long. I There's the one side that is so beneficial, and sometimes it appears so. And then on the other side, you have devastation, horrific awfulness. And I thought, well, as a trained person, I got to take all that and just put it in the ground. Like, just
Mm-hmm.
get rid of it. And now I don't want to do that. I'm regurgitating it. I'm pulling it out of the ground. And I'm able and willing to speak about things that I saw wrong. And I don't want to bury it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a something similar I heard. Tell me if this is at all along the same lines of what you were just saying, where people will talk about taking the worries, the stresses, the anxieties, the freakouts of others or themselves, while in the cult, having the cult experience, and sticking it on a shelf. I just can't think about this right now. I got to stick it on a shelf and stick it on a shelf until eventually the damn shelf breaks.
Yeah.
And that's when they kind of start having their wake up moments, right? I put it other ways, but it's another way I've heard about this, being.
Well, that is a good way of putting it, is that, yeah, you can what do they call it? Compartmentalize. You can put them in boxes, put them on a shelf. But yes, that's what happened with me, is that I just decided, you know what? I'm done being quiet.
Yeah.
I'm done being quiet, because there are other people who have experienced similar things, and I am not willing to sit silent. I am not a quiet girl.
Right. You were trained how high in terms of your auditing? You did the briefing course, right?
Correct. I completed the briefing course in 1993 and graduated. I did not do my internship, but I did all of that at the Advanced Org St. Hill organization in Los Angeles, all of it. It took me
Right.
almost 4 years while I was working full time as a teenager as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
Okay.
young schools.
Yeah. So, what did you think at that time about what you could do in the world because you were an auditor? What was your experience of that? How did you think of yourself and the world around you as an auditor?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm going to laugh a little bit.
Here for.
Well, I audited many, 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 many people. My favorite experiences, to be honest with you, were auditing Sea Org members.
Mm.
I made a couple of clears. They had to be verified, but I did all the grades on a few people, and apparently 2 of them went clear, whatever
Sure.
that means. But my favorite thing was I was so honored. I had Sea Org members in uniform. I'm on the meter, they're on the cans across from me. Sorry, this is like how auditing works for your audience.
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 terminals that you pick up, and there's a low voltage that goes through.
Wait a minute. Oh, what? 2 terminals? You mean the cans?
Sorry. Yeah, the tin cans that you hold.
Yeah.
The idea is that this instrument will react to mental thought and mass, or
Yeah.
mental charge, as they say. But my greatest honor, I thought that when the public were fine, like fellow students. I got loaded. I was the rough case girl, meaning not me. Anybody who was a rough case, whether public or even SO, Sea Org, they sent them to me.
What's a rough case? What do you mean?
Well, I'm sure you know what it means, but
Well, I do, but the audience doesn't.
Yeah. Let me explain. In my, I don't have a reference on it, but a rough case would be considered a person who is trying to get auditing or getting auditing, but apparently it's not going as smoothly as one would like, or the case supervisor would like. They have some upsets, they have some really tough stuff to go through, or they're uncommunicative, or who knows what. It could be anything. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be anything. I was sent all the rough cases because I was good at it, because I could sit down and listen. And the one thing that I can say that I walked away with from my auditing experience is that I'm a really good listener. I could sit down with any person from any walk of life. But I think that's me. I used to attribute that to Scientology, and now I attribute it to just how I am.
That's an interesting point, because of course the first thing a Scientologist would say is, well, yeah, but an auditor is by definition one who listens.
Right.
So you're saying other auditors weren't listening? What that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, why would I be assigned? This is a good question. Mm-hmm. Why would I be assigned the ones, the pre-clears or persons receiving auditing? Why would I be assigned as a student on the briefing course all the weirdos? What? Well, you can't listen. You don't have your training routines in. You can't confront them. But yeah, they all came to me. I dealt with them, and it all went well. I got very well done.
Right. That's very interesting, because
it is kind of wild, because I thought even that's a really good point that you make, because I didn't really see it at the time. I was like, why do I get all the rough cases? Like, what about the guy who's already class 4 and doing the briefing course? I was not a classed auditor. I just started on the BC, the briefing course, St. Hills Special Briefing Course.
Right. In other words, you kind of jumped the line straight to the university.
Right. Exactly. Right. But I'm like, well, wait a sec. You have a way upper class person shooting a different person, a PC pre-clear to me because you can't handle them, and we're at AOLA. Like, what? Or ASHO? What?
Yeah, it's a little weird, isn't it?
Totally.
Especially because there's a theme or a mantra that runs through all of Scientology, from the bottom to the top, from side to side, everywhere in there. It permeates the entire thing. And that is the idea that there is one right way to do audit.
Yes, exactly.
Right? There's only one way to do, no matter what process or procedure or action you're doing. And there are thousands of different actions you can do,
like laser,
as an auditor, but there's only one right way to do it. And you're trained.
So how can you have a rough case?
What's that?
So how can you have a rough, quote unquote, rough case?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Because how do you have a rough
tech is standard tech? So
exactly. So what is it that makes a rough case? Because really what we're talking about with a rough case is somebody who isn't doing or responding the way a pre-clear, a person who's getting auditing, is supposed to respond. You're supposed to go and do.
Yeah, you don't fit the bill.
What?
You don't fit the bill. Like you're not.
It's a round peg in a square hole situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. It's true.
And
I got all the rough cases. Man, I got all the rough cases.
You got all the rough cases.
I kind of loved it, but they weren't rough to me because at the time I was a very, very, very dedicated auditor and Scientologist at the time. And it was my honor to audit anyone, but I was extremely strict. And at the time, I felt that I got results.
Right.
Now I've come to learn, and it's kind of sad for me, that several of those people, especially a couple of elder Sea Org members, are either gone, like passed away, or, well, I'm happy if they're gone, but many of them are not doing well, and it weighs on my heart.
Do you feel responsible for that?
No.
Okay, good.
No, but I wish I had known what I know now then.
Oh, yeah. Don't we all? Yes.
So it's only that.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Let me explore this a little bit more with you, because I'm curious about this now, and I haven't really spoken with anybody about auditing and rough cases and this kind of thing in a while. So I'm some questions are occurring to me, or a way of thinking about this is occurring to me that hasn't particularly occurred to me before. So I wanted to ask you about this a little bit. You said that you audited mostly Sea Org members. Of course, this would be people who are staffed there in Los Angeles at Big Blue at the complex there. Those Sea Org members, right?
Yes, but I have to correct you. I didn't audit mostly Sea Org members.
You didn't?
Some.
You just enjoyed auditing them the most.
Right.
Got it. Okay. I
there were several, like DFP, directors of processing, and CSs, and registrars.
Yeah, lots of different Sea Org members holding different jobs, basically.
But I delivered all the grades through. Grade auditing is lower level auditing up to clear, just to explain to the audience. So I delivered several of those and many, many rundowns. And every once in a while, I'd have a Sea Org member come across my plate. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. But it was such a pleasure for me. I sat up straight in my chair, like, holy moly, I got a Sea Org member. Squeeze the cans, please. It was like a big deal for me to do that. And I ran different rundowns on different folks, and of course did all the stuff standardly and turned it in and all that. But in the back of my mind, especially with Sea Org, I didn't see their lives improve.
You didn't see their lives
improve.
Okay.
Yeah, they were happy at the end of the session, of course, but I didn't see them skipping down the hallway or telling me good stuff about their families. Nothing. It's like they disappeared again. And it
Right.
made me wonder, like, was that, what did I just do? Like, what did I contribute to? And it got my brain cranking about, did I help them or not? I don't know. It felt like it at the time. You know, you go to the examiner, which is a place where you go after a session to, again, grasp on the cans on the e-meter and verify that you are in a happy state, let's say.
Yeah.
That always happened. But then they didn't seem happier after, like 2 days later, 3 days later. Phew.
Well, it's hardly a surprise given the fact that they worked in the Sea Org.
Exactly. Now I know that. At the time, I didn't understand that. I got sad. I was like, did I fail you? Because I would see them in the hallway, or one or two of them, you know, walking around limping or head down, and I would wonder, gosh, did that do any good?
That's interesting.
I feel bad. It really did.
Did you doubt the tech?
I guess I started to, yes.
That's very interesting.
But not when I was on the briefing course. It was not until later.
Well, you said you'd audit them, and then 2 days later, you'd see them in the hallway. And
oh, I see what you're saying. I guess in the back of my mind, I did, but I was not willing to let that thought come forward.
Right. So am I understanding this right?
I would be like, okay, let's red tag them. But what? I can't red tag an ESO member. Red tag is when you, well, that's a 24-hour period. But
yeah, I don't know if we would want to get into that right now. We're doing a lot of technical explaining.
But I'm saying that it did make me wonder, like, why is, I'm not going to say any names, why is she hunched over and limping after 2 days, let's say 2 days after I delivered this rundown to her? Mm-hmm. Why would that be? And so, yeah, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, either I must have done something wrong, or I missed something, or it doesn't work. But that was in the back of my mind.
Right. Because people who get auditing are not supposed to be limping around and hunched over no matter what the reason is for that happening.
Right. You're either labeled this, or this, and it gets handled. And these are Sea Org members. Some of these people. I dealt with one gal. She was a rough case. And she got brought to me when I was a student auditor on the briefing course. She was she was a ripper. I kind of love her in a way. But we had some, and we're co-auditing. So it's like there's people all around. You can see the auditors and see the pre-clears all around you on the tables spread around the course room. Everybody can hear everybody.
Yeah. In other words, you're in a room where there's about 30 different auditing sessions happening at the same time with students auditing for course room credit.
That's right.
And they're doing formal auditing in the classroom, but it's not a
formal
like it usually is, because this auditing is being done by students and it's being supervised or overseen by a teacher supervisor person who's trained in how to do all this stuff. That's the setup, right?
Yes. And that started midway through the time when I was on the briefing course. It used to be that I could go to a separate room and it was quiet and you know,
Oh, you could just do the student auditing in a separate place.
Yeah, in the beginning of the briefing course.
Yeah.
But then came the whole like look in and plug in and monitoring. That came mid briefing course for me.
Yeah.
And I was not used to that. And I wasn't ever actually comfortable with that. Like, I thought that's kind of weird. Like, so and so right there, literally like 3 feet away from me. How can you be in session when you can hear somebody talking about like their dog died or whatever right over there, like literally sitting next to you? It's very difficult. And plus, you have a plug in to your e-meter so they can see the reads, and then the supervisor's coming around and looking over your shoulder. That is not a counseling session.
Well, none of this is a counseling session. Yeah.
I know that.
One-on-one.
This is like doubly not a counseling session. And it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like when I want to help someone, I want to be one-on-one and actually, just have a one-on-one.
Sure.
A quiet time where they don't have to worry about somebody looking over their shoulder or what the meter says or whatever.
Yeah, but
that's how they train. That's how they train auditors. And so I was being hovered over by the supervisor or multiple supervisors, and then trying to just narrow the focus to our auditing session right there across the table, like you and me. It's just you and me. Let's go. Squeeze the cans, please. And we would go ahead, but then, certain stuff would come up, and we're in the middle of a big course room with all kinds of folks around, and they're doing their own thing as well. But some of the stuff that would come up and, breaking down into tears, yelling, you name it, I dealt with it. But in the midst of all this, that is not private counseling. But again, you could justify it by saying, oh, you're a student auditor. But I felt like I was a earnest auditor, like I really wanted to help. So sometimes I would request a private room depending on the pre-clear. If it was a severely disturbed person, I'd say, I'd send a note to the case supervisor, which is the person that oversees all the auditing in the particular org. I would say, I need a private room. And I did that a few times because I knew that this could get rough or nasty, or not physically, but just, mentally. Right. So I did that. And on occasion, I think twice, I got that approved. Oof. It is not an environment for mental healing.
Yeah, yes, I would definitely agree with that. For every reason. But it's also an environment of sacred science and loaded language and an awful lot of milieu control, as Lifton would say, right? There's a lot of controls in place in this environment, and through these controls, therapy or healing or spiritual awareness are supposed to happen. I'm curious. I mean, it doesn't happen, but it's supposed to. That's why we agreed to all those ridiculous rules and stuff and put up with all this nonsense and e-meters and all the rest. I mean, none of this is conducive to really helping people in a personal, private way, but we all kind of pretended that it was. And it's that part that I'm actually a little interested in talking about this with you, because you have this idea as an auditor that you have gads and gads of knowledge. You've listened to, hundreds of L. Ron Hubbard lectures on this course you did. You're studying the entire history of Dianetics and Scientology from the beginning. That's what this course consists of. It's huge.
That's true.
you believe that you are one of the most educated and informed people when it comes to spiritual awareness and ability on the planet, right? Upper 10th of the upper 20th of the human beings, right? Or our auditors, Hubbard is quoted as saying, right? So coming at it from that perspective, and then you mentioned, and I just wanted to pick on this a little bit because I'm curious, I'm still curious about this business of you were getting all the rough cases. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, there are requirements of different auditing you're supposed to be doing, different forms of auditing you're supposed to be doing in order to get through the course. You can't graduate the course without doing some fix-ups.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Without fixing some people's broken
correction lists, fix-ups, certain rundowns, etc. Yeah. Yeah,
they call them repair auditing.
Correct.
Or review auditing, one of those two things, right? And that's required as part of getting through the course.
Yes.
You saying, and I'm only because I'm not trying to grill you here, I'm just trying to understand the situation. When you were getting your pre-clears assigned to you to do your requirements, was there an overabundance of repair pieces, or were you just being given the repairs that you needed to do to get through the course?
Good question. I can't say there was an overabundance, but I can say that the rough ones, not all, but many landed on my plate. Depending on where I was on my training, they'd be like, oh, send her to her, or send him to her, send her to her. So I had a reputation.
Yeah.
And I had a reputation of being like the go-to girl. Like, oh yeah, I got it. Have a seat. And boom, boom, boom. I'll get you through it. I was good with the meter. I was good with the lists and the correction lists and the commands and the training routines. And so I got a lot of people that it would happen sometimes like this. And this is kind of sad in a way. Not public and not fellow students, but the Sea Org members. They were almost blessed to be granted permission to get auditing,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Sea Org members, most, I would imagine to this day, hardly ever get to do that, even though that's something they were promised. And I feel, even though I don't believe in auditing, I feel sorry for them in that sense that, gosh, they deserve it. Even though, you know what I'm saying? Like,
it's the irony is really thick on this one because auditing is psychologically destructive to a person's mental health and well-being.
Right. And so I don't wish it upon them, but I know that they.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
Yes. And so whenever I was told, I come to course and I'm told, oh, so-and-so, she's such and such with the Sea Org, I'd be like, oh, like I felt so honored because, but like I said, in the back of my mind, I knew that they barely ever got any good treatment. They barely ever got any auditing. They barely ever had any time to sleep. I knew it. And so for me to put them in front of me and conduct anything, I would have rather gone to a park and just talk to them, to be honest. Or, take a drive, or...
You'd rather do that than audit them?
Totally. Well, at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's what I would imagine. I mean, taking a ride or going to the park is nothing compared to an auditing session.
No. At the time, I thought, okay, let's get down to business.
How you feel now?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but now, cutting to now.
Yeah.
I wish I could, throw a picnic.
Right. Yeah, that would do more good than an auditing session, that's for sure.
know.
I mean, yeah.
At the time, I thought that I was doing something really worthwhile. It made me feel good, and I got certain people, happier by the end of it. But it was always more important to me to audit staff than it was to audit public. Oh,
Oh, I understood. I finished the RPF program and I wanted to be a staff auditor really, really badly
I can
because
understand that.
yeah, because I had audited for 1,000 hours on the RPF, and thought to myself that auditing is the core practice of Scientology, and we should be applying it to our staff, meaning the Sea Org and the staff members, right? The people who actually work for the church. Because you're absolutely right that they don't get much in the way of the rewards of Scientology, if you want to think about it that way. And inside the bubble world of Scientology, auditing is the best reward there is.
Sure.
It's supposed to be freeing you from the shackles of your, past life trauma and all that.
That's right.
It's a big deal. In 17,
it's not right, but you're right in commenting that way.
Yeah, that's how we thought about it, right?
Of course.
And you're absolutely right that, in 17 years in the Sea Org, I didn't make one step forward on the bridge to total freedom, despite the 1,000 hours of auditing around the RPF, right? I'm curious, though. I would like to ask you a little bit more. I'd like to pick your brain a little bit more about the Sea Org, who were all around you. You're doing this class in a Sea Org where Sea Org members are delivering this to you and teaching you and supervising you and monitoring your progress in all of this. And you're aware of the fact, as an auditor and student in this place, that these are people who are not sleeping. These are people who are working extraordinarily long hours, 7 days a week. And they're people who aren't really even being very well fed or rested, right? Because you're having to put them on an e-meter. And I'm sure sometimes that was challenging. So I'm curious, how did you think about these people as a public level Scientologist paying for services and stuff? What was your think about this situation? Did it ever occur to you that, man, this really shouldn't be this way? And it's not a right or wrong gotcha question. I'm honestly just curious,
Okay. That is a very good question. At the time, I can only equate it to the word saints.
Okay. This is not the only person. You're not the only person who said this.
That's all right.
Tell me more about this. Explain. Please.
I might even cry.
Oh.
It's okay.
Okay.
Okay, the cause for the emotion there, and you can pick this up wherever you'd like. My literal love for the Sea Org comes not for the purpose of the Sea Org, but the people that I came to know so well and treasured. I'll never forget when my registrar, a gal, she was so excited. She had finally gone clear, and she'd been in the Sea Org like her whole life, basically. And she had finally gone clear, and she posted her poster, her cert on the certificate on the wall, and was like, "Oh my gosh, Donna, wow, that's awesome!" And she goes, "Yeah." And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go see my family for the first time in 15 years, I think it was. And it broke my heart. It broke my heart. And I also, one of my class 9 auditors at AOLA, he He's an Australian fella. And he told me, like, we do our audit, of course, security checking and false purpose rundowns, meaning looking for overs and evil purposes, etc. One time after session, we sat down and talked, and we had some coffee, and he told me about his daughter that he hadn't talked to in a long time. I don't know if she disconnected from him. I'm not quite sure on that one. But he he wanted to go back to Australia. He wanted to go home. So I got to know, and many more,
Mm-hmm.
many other Sea Org members. I got to know quite well because I lived and dealt with them for years and years and years, decades.
Yep.
David Light is pretty well known around the turf.
Famous or infamous, depending on your experiences with him. He was a sales guy, and he was in the Sea Org for a long time. David Light.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Well, it broke my heart because, well, I met him on the Free Winds.
Right.
And then but actually, that's not true. My father worked with him in Los Angeles trying to get money together to create the Free Winds, which happened.
Oh, back in the mid 80s, before the Free Winds.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but my dad was not in the Sea organization, but he just helped.
Right.
So I met David Light back then when I was in my teens. And then when I went to the Free Winds when I was in my later teens, twice, I met up with David Light and we got to be pals, actually. He tried to recruit me a few times. I'm like, no, it's not going to happen, dude. It's not going to happen. But I sent him a Christmas card I think it was 2 years ago. And it came back to me saying, unable to deliver. No, that must have been 3 years ago because I was there in March of 2020. And I went over I looked around all over for him because we were like friends at this point. Like, guess what? I'm not going to join the Sea Org. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay you $100,000 for the IS. I can't. Sorry. But I went to go find him to say hello and buy him a coffee because I got this Christmas card back that said unable to deliver. And I was told that he had passed away.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody told anybody. Like,
not outside the Sea Org. I mean, within there would have been a thing, but
yeah, I was told at the cashier's desk.
Yeah.
At Asho. Somebody came up
with death very callously in the Sea Org. It's a very callous.
Oh, gross! That's why I cry. It's because there are people I truly care for.
Yeah.
And David Light, yeah, he can be a tricky one, but I still loved him. He was kind to me.
I think what this shows, and I think in spades, and what I was sort of hoping would become evident in my questioning, which is the very complicated relationship that the Scientology public have with the Sea Org.
Yeah.
It's not a simple thing. The Sea Org doesn't just exist as a body of mean-spirited people who give a lot of orders and demand a lot of money out of Scientologists. It's way more personal and complicated than that. And you've done a wonderful job today describing some of the layers of that complication. You can love some of these people. You can.
Oh, I do.
You can consider them, candidates for sainthood, right? Because of the sacrifices and the work and the rough lives that they have, that many public Scientologists are fully aware of. They're not in the dark about this.
That's right.
Right.
So, and actually, that's a good point that you bring up because if you don't mind my jumping in,
please.
This is a relationship that for better for worse, mostly for worse, but it's a relationship where, you get to know your registrar. Donna, oh my gosh, I love her to death. I mean, I love her. Susan Watson is my godmother. Wow.
Sure.
And so many Sea Org members that I've actually lived with when I worked for Cipro, lived with them, and there's so many. They're like they're, even though I'm out, they're still brothers and sisters to me in a weird way. But, and so many wonderful gestures from the Sea Org. I'm anti Scientology, but I'm not anti those people at all.
Exactly. And that's the nuance of this. Anyway, yeah. So it's a complicated relationship because in many, many ways, if we're going to step back from the model of the thing that is Scientology, these organizations and groups and people that make this thing up, the Sea Org is the top dog. The Sea Org is at the top of this whole ladder, and David Miscavige is at the top of the Sea Org, and that's how he runs Scientology. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm saying this now at the end while assuming you've known this all along. But my point is that the Sea Org are the oppressors of Scientology. That is the role they fill, is they are the ones who keep Scientology working. Well, Scientology is an oppressive authoritarian system. So they're the ones keeping it working. But it's not black and white for the membership of, oh, this is my oppressor. They don't think about them that way at all. And I think today we managed kind of organically to show the complicated relationship. And this was just a little bit of it. I mean, there's other aspects of this that touch people's lives too. But you're talking about, as an auditor, you're trying to care for these people. You're trying to help them along. You're trying to do processes on them, apply Scientology to them. Because in this bubble world of Scientology, this is how you help. And it's this really kind of interesting relationship. So when I've said over the years that, that Scientology is or that cults in general, generate these codependent relationships, I think today we've kind of seen exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The interesting factor that I have, looking back, have noticed is that I can literally say that there were directors of processing. It's a position within the organization, a registrar, an ethics officer, a chaplain, a letter registrar, even an RTC rep. I could literally look back right now, and if I had picked up on the signals, they wanted to get out and talk to me. Like there were things they couldn't say. Even an ethics officer, there were things they could not say to my face, but wanted to, and I could feel it. As a trained auditor, I could sense it, literally. But then there's that line that the cult creates where, oh, you can't step over that line. You can't talk about that. But I could feel it in the air and read it in their eyes, literally. And I guess that fed into, again, chipping away at my removal from the cult, because I was like, wow, how could that be that this most incredible person, talented person, wonderful person, I can tell it's like right on the back of their throat and they can't spit it out. I sensed it, but I didn't know to ask, because that's not okay. Like, you can't do that.
That's right.
But yes, in retrospect, I see that there are so many that are not happy, I wouldn't say, and not, but scared to talk about what their concerns are. And
That's
so
right.
that's, again, why I do a video like this, that maybe one day, one of them, two of them, three of them, hopefully more of them might cross your path or many others' paths so that they feel enough courage to, and I don't want to say courage, gumption, or, take a deep breath and leap of faith and go for it. It's worth it.
Yeah, as far as getting out of there, absolutely.
That's what I
Absolutely.
mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Because there's and we can maybe talk about this more in the future. I'd like to talk more about auditing with you because you did do the briefing course and did have so many hours of experience doing it. And auditing is something that's worth talking about it at a more nuanced way than we've discussed in the past. I've broken it down as far as, well, it's covert hypnosis and all this kind of stuff, but there's a lot more going with it than just that. For example, you just mentioned that the Sea Org members can't really unload on you or tell you as a human being to human being how they're really feeling or what's going on with them or what's going on in their life or situation all the time, because there's a constant attitude, sort of veneer in the Sea Org that you can only go so far. You can't share with non-Sea Org members the difficulties of Sea Org life. You're not supposed to, this kind of thing. That's going to get in the way of them being able to be in an auditing session and be fully transparent if their auditor isn't a Sea Org member too. And that adds a whole nother layer of complication to that practice of auditing that isn't even supposed to be there, and this kind of thing, right?
Exactly right. Because there's like an enforced withhold
Yeah.
that they cannot reveal. Like, there's stuff going on they can't talk about because I am a public, but yet you're in session with me and you're supposed to be like completely transparent, as you say.
Yep.
I don't want to get too technical, but try flying roods on an SO member.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that means for the audience that, like, it's not going to be fun to get through the rudimentary things before a session where they tell what's on their mind that makes them not want to be in session.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Good luck with that.
So good luck. So I always felt that in the air, and that bugged me because I've always had this propensity. I would have been a great Sea Org member for about probably 6 months.
Yeah. Well, there's another aspect to this that since we're on the topic of this and we've discussed this, I want to say also, which is my perspective as a Sea Org member and in PAC, who actually did know and work with some of the people that you've talked about today. And this, I'm just going to say this, not because I'm trying to, mess with your sense of reality, but I just want to offer another one.
Okay.
From the point of view of being in the Sea Org and having been there, you have this idea as a public auditor, as somebody who was there in PAC for many years, that these are your friends. You love these people. You care about these people. The Sea Org members don't think about you the same way. Yeah.
That's because I've come to know that, and you're right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
It's not an equal way.
It's not a mutual thing.
It's not. You're not. Right.
I know. And that was heartbreaking too, to a degree. When I had my last visit to AOLA in Los Angeles, Advanced Organization Los Angeles, I had a few run-ins, like weird experiences with a few Sea Org members, and it kind of broke my heart a little bit because I did feel like they were my friends.
Exactly.
All of a sudden, they were like, the registrar I used to work with is no longer there. Where is she? She's gone. they won't tell me where she is. So-and-so has died. So-and-so has moved to wherever. And it was like my whole group was gone. I considered it my group to a degree as a public.
Right.
But then I got this and you're right. No, we're public. You guys are the elite. You guys are the hardcore. And I was never the hardcore, but I felt like I had an alliance of sorts in a weird way, like a friendship at least.
Yeah.
And we were on the same team to a degree, but it became very apparent to me that no, you're not on our team. No.
No. And I think that point
You're
of
right.
is one of those kind of wake up moments for a lot of public.
Yeah,
right?
It was
because they'll play with your emotions this way, and they'll play with the nature of the relationship this way. If it's a salesperson, well, of course they're going to push you with attention and admiration and care and this kind of thing, so long as it's leading to you giving money.
Right.
Otherwise, there's no point in them fostering that relationship because they need to get the money, and that's the only reason they're talking to you, right?
That's right.
Sea Org members have a much more transactional view of the relationships that they have with the Scientology public. And I think it's just worth mentioning that in the context of everything we've said here, because, you have and had deep wells of emotion with these relationships. And, it's just not that way with the Sea Org, but they will put on an act or an apparency that it is.
I fell for it to a degree.
It's not necessary anymore. And then you kind of get the real, and you're like, oh God, what's this?
Yeah, it's very true. And it's kind of saddening because they are people.
Of course. Yeah. Please let me clarify that that I don't think these are people who are doing this out of maliciousness. It's the nature of the environment they're in.
Right.
They're told, dictated to in very clear terms, you cannot be friends with the Scientology public. That's literally what we were told. That's not the relationship you have with the public, but it's in their best interests to not tell you that.
Right.
And that's another layer of deception, I think,
I totally get what you're saying. Like my ethics officer and my senior director of processing both had my cell phone number. And at the time, this is years ago, they used to have a cell phone. And they would text me like, hey, how's it going today? Or, oh, I got your latest write-up. It's great. That kind of thing. Then that got all shut down. There was all of a sudden, there was no way to communicate unless you go into the organization and go directly to their office and see them in person and probably on the meter. So that whole cell phone communication system got shut down, probably because trouble started. Wasn't me, but.
Well, that too much communication is definitely a bad thing in Scientology.
But it leads up to what you were talking about, is that I used to feel like I had a personal connection. Right. And now I realize, based on what you're saying and what I know and my experience, that no.
Yeah, not so much. Not so much. And again, to be clear, I'm not trying to make Sea Org members out to be monsters. I'm saying that they are in an environment that doesn't allow for compassion. Right. And there's an apparency of compassion, but it's not really real. It's not fully realized.
They're not allowed.
It's not allowed. Exactly. And I think that this is an important point to make. And part of this, and I didn't start the show thinking this is where we're going to end up, but it's important stuff. So
it is an important point. Yeah. I remember the last time I left AOLA, my ethics officer ran down the hallway and gave me a giant hug. What? Like, I had never had a hug from her in my whole life, and I've known her for 2 decades. But she just ran down the hallway and gave me a hug. I was like, was
Why
that
who did that? Why did she do that?
I don't know. Well, I was leaving the next morning on a plane back to my home. But she had never, ever, ever, ever done that before. No, she's the most stern, like, stormtrooper you ever met. But for some reason, she did that.
Interesting.
She ran down the hallway, got to the reception desk. It was 11 o'clock at night, and she gave me a big hug. I was like,
maybe a human moment crept through after all.
exactly. That's how I felt about it. I was like, wow, you are human.
No, it absolutely happens because they are human and it does slip through. But I can tell you again, from within the Sea Org point of view, that's a red flag, not a green flag.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
It's like, why'd you do that?
Somebody could talk to her about that.
Yeah. Well, it was in full reception area. So the reception was there. And
yeah,
I think the call set was there. The qualification secretary was there. So
yeah,
that was, she probably got busted or in trouble.
I probably not, but I'm just saying that it's something that could be considered a red flag in that environment would be the point. It's up, it's down, it's black and white. That's all, it's just.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's a backwards world there. And that's why Sea Org members act the way they do and why they can be so difficult to understand because they're operating on a whole different set of rules that have to be interacting with the public. Every person you named, right, are public interface people. And they have their roles and their jobs and their function. And they are very, very attuned to those functions over a human connection, to put it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that has been very obvious to me over, growing up in Scientology, literally, that there's kind of like the human face and then there's the staff face or that face. It doesn't even have to be staff. It could be the training routines face. I'm a pro at that face. Like I can do it for many hours straight.
Well, I hope you don't.
I can detect the difference now. I think it depends, on how good you are at it. But
okay,
I've learned how important it is not to wear that face. There's a certain time and place. Like if you're in a war zone, okay, fine. Like literally in a war zone.
Sure.
Okay. But in day-to-day life, there's no reason to stare somebody down. Like, why?
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, let's start wrapping up here.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we've had a good talk today. I think
it's been great. I appreciate it very much.
You bet. Absolutely. I hope folks out there, I hope you got something out of this. I know that this was a jargon intensive episode. We did our best to kind of keep up along the way, but we are assuming that you kind of know some of this lingo already, from the earlier episodes and from the stuff on my channel. And I would invite anybody who is, if this is your first podcast that you're listening to on my channel, I would invite you to go to my Scientology playlists, to look around and see the wealth of information that is here that clarifies everything we've been talking about. I mean, none of this stuff is uncovered on my channel. Auditing and the classwork and case supervise, all this stuff, ethics, it's all here explained in detail if you explore around on my channel. So I will invite you to check that out. Scientology, unfortunately, is a vocabulary intensive, complicated subject. So it's hard to get around some of that sometimes. But Julie, I think we did a good job. I want to thank you again for being part of the show here today.
Thank you so very much, Chris. It's been a pleasure and always great to talk with you. And I hope that this reaches someone who it can make a difference for them.
Exactly. Me too. All right, folks. We will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.